Hello, and welcome to MentorDINO. I'm your host, Katelyn Rossier. I am an architect and founder of MentorDINO. I firmly believe that architecture, engineering, and construction professionals can achieve true success by embracing human skills as their guiding principle. So each week, I interview amazing professionals in and around the AEC industry as a way to share stories, inspiration, and advice for others finding their own unique career path. Thank you to all of our current subscribers, and if you're new, we'd love to have you join our community. So if you like this episode, please do me a favor and hit subscribe, like, or leave a comment below. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support them on their own career journey. So let's dive in. I really hope you enjoy this conversation. Hello, listeners, and welcome back to the MentorDINO podcast. I'm your host, Katelyn Rossier, and we are happy to share 61 episodes in Season 1 and taking a small break before Season 2 begins. During this break, I'm giving you some topic-specific highlights based on various advice discussed in Season 1. Feel free to go back to these episodes to learn more about their stories, as well as checking out our other episodes, because these are just some highlights. And don't forget, Season 2 kicks off on February 13th. And for this topic-specific episode, I want to talk about alternative career paths. I've talked about how I talk to professionals in and around the AEC industry, and I also talk to those that have pivoted their careers, whether it is pivoting into an alternative career path that is not the traditional architect, engineer, contractor path, or has completely pivoted to a different industry altogether. I feel with the background in the AEC industry and those problem-solving skills, if we shift on to other careers and other professions, that may not necessarily always be a bad thing, because oftentimes it's finding what you truly like out of the profession and where you want to take your goals and your career. So I'm going to hit on just 6 professional clips this one. And there have been plenty of others throughout Season 1 that you can go back and take a look towards. So let's dive in. The first one I'm going to bring to you is Stephen Albert. He was episode number 14, and he shifted over to the owner side. So he worked as an architect here locally in Pittsburgh for local firms and had an opportunity to jump over to the owner side, where he is a project manager for a local healthcare provider. So we talk about what it's like flipping over to the owner side. Again, he never thought he would be on the owner side. He also didn't think he would end up specializing more in healthcare design. But we talk also a lot about the importance of having very intelligent architects, engineers, and contractors helping the owner's side on healthcare projects and knowing the differences with different healthcare systems, how everything integrates together, those complex equipments and workflows that he does on a regular basis, and also gives advice if you are working with an owner's rep or owner for a healthcare provider and what they need and what can be helpful and how he can best do his job to help you get your designs complete. So for his clip, I took a little piece about what it was like for him to flip over to the owner side, but feel free to take a look at the full episode if you're learning how to level up your teams to work better with your owners. So hope you guys enjoy this little clip from Stephen Albert's episode number 14.
Not that we don't build things outside, but it's certainly a lot less rare.
And how did that, it kind of leads into the next question of how did you decide to move from the owner or the firm side to the owner side? Was it time in the economy? Or somebody reach out to you, or were you looking?
So I had been through the Great Recession, right? So I'm of an age, right? And a lot of my peers had gone through, whether it was layoffs or reduction in hours and whatever. And I experienced some of that as well. But the firm that I worked for at the time was very adamant that in knowing that its chief resource was its people, and that when the economy would turn around, things would take off quickly, and the only way the firm would be successful is if the team was in place. So we all took on a little bit of sacrifice individually and collectively, and the bottom line is I kept my job. And at the time, that was really important. And as predicted, everything, came roaring back, right? But what happened from my perspective in the industry is that, and I see this now on a daily basis, there's a gap now because there are a lot of people of, sort of my contemporaries, my peers, that were sort of pushed out of architecture. And by the time they left to do something else, they didn't really want to go back for whatever reason. So there is this sort of gap of experience of people that are, right now around that sort of like 40, 45-year-old age span.
The more like senior project manager level, when I started, it was the project manager level that was the gap. And it's going to keep moving as time goes.
Right. And there's also a mentorship gap in that way too, because the people that I would have relied on as my mentors, if I was, today, they're retiring. So there's that gap is sort of like a bubble that kind of moves on. And so not that was a reason for me leaving, because it wasn't. And in a sense, I'm also, I guess you could say I'm also now part of that because I left.
I always say left-ish.
Right. Well, and that doesn't mean that I don't ever do it again. Right.
Yeah.
Go back to what I said to begin with.
I'm still
an architect. Right.
Yep.
So, and go back to what I said about working at Bird Hill in the co-op, where I said I would never do healthcare. This was a case of I was ready for a different challenge. I felt like it was time to do something different. And this was an opportunity that was available. And I looked at it, and sometimes you stick your neck out and say, well, I'm going to try it. I'm going to see if there's any interest on the other side. And if there is, we'll continue to explore the conversation. I can always say no, right?
Yep.
I can always decide this is not for me. And so, I went on an interview and I liked what I heard. And I liked what the work-life balance was going to look like. At the time we were expecting our second child. And, after working a lot of deadlines and a lot of late nights and a lot of weekends, and, this was an opportunity to maybe get away from some of that. So that there are all kinds of different factors at different points in your life. Right. And, it felt like a natural fit. They were willing to take a chance on me. I was willing to take a chance on them. And so I jumped in.
Yeah. And you've been rocking it since you've been there 8 years now?
8 years. Yeah. And it was when I told people what I was doing, I'll never forget some of the reactions. Like, are you crazy? Like, really? At the time it was, you're going to wear a tie every day? I don't do that anymore.
They've loosened up a little bit.
Right. I'm going to do it. Right. Well, we went through a pandemic. But yeah, so anything is possible. And I think what I will say, where someone might think that leaving firm life could have stunted my growth as an architect, I will tell you absolutely not. If anything, it accelerated my growth as an architect. It just in a different way. And what I mean by that is that as I work on projects from the owner's side, my job is much more as a facilitator. And so I'm working between the consulting architects and engineers that are doing the project, hospital leadership, a whole host of other people, and then all of the other constituent groups within the hospital user group, which could be anybody from the actual end users who don't know anything about design, don't know anything about the regulations that we're trying to follow, right? We have to translate everything, to infection prevention and support people in the hospital and everyone that kind of makes this place actually work. I have to be able to figure out how to bring them into the project at the appropriate time to extract from them the knowledge and experience that they have that's going to make the thing work at the end. So that's where I say taking those architectural problem solving skills and applying them really matters, because that's what I'm doing on a daily basis. I'm kind of running in between everything and making sure that it's all working. In addition to all the other project manager type stuff like contracts and change orders and dealing with RFIs and, all that kind of stuff, right? The real secret in the sauce is how you work with people. And so, coming to UPMC, now I'm working for a corporate organization. Again, never said I would work for a corporation. Here I am. But my world widened up immediately. All of a sudden, my project teams that I work with are 10 times the size they used to be. I'm working with all of the contractors in the city on various different projects. I'm working with a lot of different engineers in the city. I'm working with a lot of different architects. So like now I'm in a position where I've kind of broken out of the mold where I was. And my world is a lot bigger in a sense. And that has been very rich.
Mm-hmm. So, and you're learning from, instead of a project team, maybe two in a firm, and just learning from that team, you're continuing your growth, but with a wider net. Right. And different approaches, different standards, different personalities.
Right. Well, and my mentoring, I guess, in healthcare architecture is now coming from the healthcare architects that are working on my projects. So I'm learning from them as they're, working through the project. So I'm learning about I know them better now, but like I'm learning about the guidelines. I'm learning about all of that kind of as we go. And again, that was nothing new to me because I had to learn about every project as I went anyhow.
Yep.
So that's where I'm saying, the experiences that you have, even though it doesn't seem like it may be directly related, if you can figure a way how to pivot that, I think an architect could work in just about any industry.
I'd agree with you there. And I don't want to greatly encourage everybody to leave the industry.
No.
But I do appreciate when I stumble into people who used to be in architecture or studied architecture and now they're in a different industry, because they tend to understand a little bit more what we do. And when you're trying to gather information, they get it. They get the problem solving side.
Right.
And those collaborations seem to be more interesting to me, because it's like, oh, you get it. I don't have to teach and educate as much, and you can just fly.
Right. Well, and I don't want to discourage or encourage anybody rather to leave either. I'll be the first one to tell you I need more good architects working in all the firms around Pittsburgh, and even some of the we pull from some national firms as well, depending on the size of the project. But we need that rich experience there. Just like there's a lack of people going into the trades. I think we're seeing similar things in the sort of non-tech related service industries like architecture and engineering, right? They're not, they're somehow not as attractive these days. I don't know why. So yeah, I would encourage it for the right person, the person that wants to do it for the right reasons. I'm not saying, hey, everybody go leave. No, not at all.
Yeah.
But what I would say is that with your background in architecture, you should feel pretty free about trying different project types, trying different firms, trying to find the thing that fits, and being confident in the ability that you have to really do anything. Right? So, I jumped around a bunch of different project types. Like just because you're working for a firm that only does multifamily housing or higher education doesn't mean that you can't do something else. I had a lot of work in historic preservation. What's historic preservation? It's a complex problem wrapped around a very special and important thing. And you have to figure out how to, work with this existing building in a way that honors and respects the past while preserving it so that it's going to last into the future. Well, guess what? Even if you're building a new building, you have the same goal.
Yep.
Right.
Just different materials.
Exactly.
Hope you guys enjoyed that clip from Steven. And now I want to jump over to introduce you guys to Jennifer Keegan. She was episode number 25, and I stumbled across meeting her at the Women's Leadership Summit in 2023. And she has been a great person to talk to ever since. And so she is architecturally trained, but more went into the building envelope consulting route, and now is a director of building and roofing science at GAF. So shifting over from the design side to helping consulting for architects to build envelopes, fix issues, and investigate existing conditions, all the way to more on the manufacturing side and getting on the education to help others. And so I always love talking to Jennifer because I love educating professionals to help make our projects more streamlined, easier, and help others. But Jennifer's episode talks about how there is a very steep learning curve in the education side in the AEC industry, and how she started to specialize more in the building envelope and this position, even as the director of building and roofing science at GAF, and how some professionals thought that it was a career limiting move for her. And then them coming back to her saying, I was mistaken, and is very happy to see where she's gone and taken her career. So I can't wait to introduce you guys to Jennifer. And this one, we talk about the building science side and shortening that learning curve for you. So hopefully you guys like learning a little bit more on the building science side of the AEC industry. And again, this is Jennifer with episode number 25. What does the building science department at GAF do?
So we get to do all the fun stuff that I did while I was consulting, but now it's with by getting to partner with architects and specifiers. And we really have, I kind of look at us as a three-legged stool, right? So we lead with education, we provide project support, and we have a ton of industry engagement and involvement. And so feel like that really gives us such a stable foundation, right? Our industry involvement, yes, it helps with relationships, but it also helps us stay in the know on what the trends are, the issues, the concerns, what are the problems people are facing, what are people talking about, what are the questions they're asking, what are the questions they're not asking. And that really helps us make sure that what we're bringing forward is relevant. I feel like always leading with education is, you should share what you know. And I always learn something by teaching others. So how did you hear that? How did you receive it? What were you seeing that I'm not? And let's solve that problem together. And then with the project support, that's what me and my team have been doing. I've been in the industry for 26 years now, and most of my team is somewhere in that 15 to 20 year range. We get to do that with project teams and just kind of be that, that sounding board. Come chat with us. Have you thought about this? Have you considered that? Heads up about risk associated with going down this path. And so it's a lot of fun to have those conversations and build those relationships.
Now, are you still looking at, like, when I think of on a product side, are you just looking at the products you guys sell, or are you also bringing in other products for like the whole like wall assembly system or full roof system when you're taking a look and helping architects?
Well, so GAF is a roof manufacturer. GAF, under the umbrella, C-Plast is a sister company. So C-Plast is largely roofs, waterproofing, and they also have a vertical wall waterproofing and insulation now. So that's all in our wheelhouse. But I fully believe that everything is so integrated that I can't solely talk about a roof membrane without talking about how that ties into all the other adjacent elements. So while my education is largely focused around the roof, it's very connected with, okay, so if I've got a parapet, how am I tying into that? If I've got a rising wall, how am I thinking about re-roofing without removing the cladding? How am I tying this in if I've got a single white masonry wall? What am I thinking about? How am I attaching that? All of those elements all come in. So I'm probably not going to help you detail your windows, but if you have a clerestory window that's coming into the roof, we're certainly going to talk about that and figure out how we manage that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because it's always those transitions, regardless if it's roof or wall, and it's trying to find the companies that will work together with multiple companies, because it all gets built up and works together as a full system. So that's why I was kind of curious how you guys pull all that together, because I know I've had definitely walls that come up off a roof, and that's when that happened. I learned about the snowdrift and how much I need to keep a window up so we can roof it properly, so we can flash around the window and the roofing, and it's not a hot mess on top of each other and then not going to operate, and then that's where it's going to fail. And so there's so many different connection points. So that's why I wasn't sure How far you
If
guys
your curtain wall flies by the roof,
Yeah.
you do that, right? So let's talk about those things. Those are the fun challenges you get to play with.
Yeah. And for the building science part, try to think of the best way to ask this. Like, how, from your experience, would someone else discover building science? Like, are there now education programs or something that, like, you see people major in now versus kind of your dual degree in building up?
Okay,
Like,
I see what you're asking. At first,
where are other people coming from for a building science, or if somebody wants to get on the technical side of envelopes and roofing?
Gotcha. Okay. So there are, Canada is really great with building science programs. They're ahead of us in that capacity. They've always been ahead of us in terms of building sciences. They have a more severe climate, so they see things faster than we do here. So like University of Waterloo is an amazing school that a lot of brilliant building scientists that come from. In the States, we see the ARC-E programs having a lot of positioning for building science careers, right? So I think of Cal Poly with their program there. And I think there are firms like the Wishanies and the Simpson Gumperts and Hagers and such that really focus in that space. So that you're not going to learn all of those things in school, but you're going to learn the tools, the foundation, so that you can absorb and understand and learn those things once you start your career. Initially, I thought you were asking how do people learn about building science, and I was like, well, through failure. That's how we learn, right? We learn when things fail, and we say, oh crap, how do we not do that again? How do I avoid that mistake? So
yeah, I always explain architects like pet peeves. I was like, if a senior architect has a pet peeve, that means they've been burned from that in the past, because that is the biggest lessons we learn and the costs associated with learning those lessons on a project. Then they don't want to do that mistake again. And so then it becomes like they're super nitpicky on it. So
yes, that's brilliant. We try to offer a lot of education on building science. Joe Stiebrick has a ton of education on building sciences, and a lot of it's available online. He hosts workshops. He's up in Westford, Massachusetts, so he hosts a lot physically up there, but he does travel around. And so there's a lot of good foundational resources. So that way, as an architect, you can be informed and know the right questions to ask. You don't need to know the answers necessarily, but if you know the right questions to ask, you kind of know what the red flags are. I think that's the best way as an architect to arm yourself.
Yeah. Have there been common themes that you see that people keep making similar mistakes?
I would say the biggest mistakes come in terms of condensation. Which is almost always directly tied to airflow. So the code requires the designer of record, which is very often the architect, to identify all the materials that contribute to the air control layer and detail all of those transitions and penetrations with the air barrier. You don't see that happening nearly as often as it should or could. And I find that it's often a misunderstanding or a lack of detailing in those, like you said, those transitions where assemblies come together is where the biggest risk comes. And that's where air leakage will happen, condensation comes, and then it kind of unravels from there.
Yeah, because like we have a comm check, we do, but like nothing's like a code review analysis level of the envelope system. Like, it's anything with the envelope or condensation, it's all just high level stuff. And so I feel if people don't know what they're doing, it's a little bit easier to like squeak by the building department, and you don't actually like understand it if you're not have that fine-tuned eye for, hey, we really need to make sure this exact detailing makes sense. So
I would say if you ever had an opportunity to work on a project that requires building enclosure commissioning, your learning curve would be so steep. You would learn so much in a short amount of time, because when you commission a building enclosure, not just the mechanical equipment, but the enclosure, you're required to meet certain air tightness requirements. And once you do that, now there's somebody who's focused on all those details. And usually there's a peer review process involved in there. And that peer review process is done by a building enclosure consulting firm that knows what to look through in all those details. So they are going to zoom in to all of your details and nitpick the heck out of them and really show you where those vulnerable risks are. So if you ever have a project in your company that is building enclosure commissioning, I highly recommend volunteering to get involved with that project. And if that's not a possibility, ask that team to host an education session for the rest of the company afterwards and say, this is what we learned. And if you were part of it, man, put that program together for the rest of your firm. Because once you have to teach something to somebody, you learn it at such a deeper level. And it's not going to be like, oh, I got burnt on this project. It's going to be like, no, I lived it. I learned it. I was humbled by the red lines that were all over my drawings that I felt really proud of. But I learned so much from that process. And once you start sharing that knowledge, your learning just accelerates.
skyrockets.
Yeah.
Hopefully you enjoyed the conversation with Jennifer. And now I want to take a little pivot to pivoting your career and introduce you guys to Stephanie Reckman. She was episode number 35. She is a civil engineer and switched over to be a CSM at Bluebeam. And CSM stands for Customer Success Manager. So she flipped more over to the tech side, but she's working with the software that architects and engineers use on a regular basis, as well as contractors. I even learned a quick tip on her favorite tool that can be done through Bluebeam that I wasn't aware of. So now I like to teach people those little tips. But check out the full episode if you want to hear tips on using Bluebeam or have questions for on that side. But for this, I want to talk more and give you guys the clip on how she's pivoted her career. So she is an engineer, has pivoted on the contractor side, and then pivoting over to tech, where she has really found her home and is absolutely loving her career. And even all these professionals I'm highlighting in this one all say that they love their job. And so that is very heartwarming as somebody pivots their career. Stephanie also has a pivot guide. So with her episode in the show notes, or you can find her on LinkedIn, if you're thinking about pivoting your career, you can always check out her guide to figure out the steps that she took in finding what the right path was for her. And they also just launched a website that's more of a job board, so you can see what jobs are available on the tech side that may be good fit for you if you are an architect, engineer, or contractor. So hopefully you guys enjoy this little clip from Stephanie Reichman. And again, this was episode number 35. Closing one chapter and starting another. I know since you've pivoted your career kind of into that tech Bluebeam world, what advice do you have for someone that says, but I don't know what else I can do with my engineering degree?
This is like my favorite and most hated question.
Love-hate relationship.
Yeah, a very love-hate relationship. I love it and hate it because I struggled with it so much myself, where it's like you have this incredible degree, whether it's engineering or architecture, whatever it might be. And you have built up this career capital, these skills that you feel like you can bring to other places, but you don't really know where or how. And I spent a lot of time in that space trying to figure out, like, what can I really do what would fulfill me, what would make me happy, what would I enjoy doing. And I think for anyone that's kind of on that path, I think it has to be a lot more of an introspective conversation in regards to like what you enjoy, and just being really brutally honest with yourself of what your must-haves are and what your nice-to-haves are, just like buying a house. And then once you do that, you just do a ton of research and just talk to a bunch of people. I think the networking piece of this seems to always be very much lacking, because that's what I ended up doing. I had in my previous role worked with so many different softwares that I actually just went back to all those. They were account managers mostly, connected with one specifically who had previously worked at Bluebeam. And he said, listen, like, I wasn't really sure that I felt right working in a sales role. That felt a little bit too much for me. And they suggested, like, what about the CSM kind of role? And then I ended up talking to somebody on the CSM team, and they said, like, yeah, like we love people with industry experience, which for me, all I could think of was, why would Bluebeam want someone like me? So it was such a like mismatch of expectations between like what I thought the company wanted and what the company actually wanted. And then of course you need to have a little bit of luck and timing. They ended up having a spot on the team available, so I was able to interview for that. But there's lots of different opportunities like that where your skills as, an engineer architect would work so well. The CSM role, I think, has been getting a lot of popularity recently. But there's roles within the product organization. There's a lot of consultant type positions available as well. And all this to make a kind of pitch for myself and what I'm trying to build as well here is, I actually put together a guide that kind of walks through that whole process, because for this exact reason, I think you would kind of end up in this role where you're like, I don't know what to do next. Can someone just like light the way for me? And I wish I had that when I struggled to kind of figure out what to do next. So couldn't find any decent resources out there, or any resources that kind of talked about how to make this type of transition. So I wrote a 4-part guide to cover exactly this, like how to figure out what you want to do, and then, the alignment of your LinkedIn and resume to it, and then how to talk about it in an interview so you don't end up at the interview and you're like, yeah, I don't really have any experience, but you should take a chance on me.
Yeah. Hey, I'll say, like, my husband went into a job interview and they're like, hey, like, he's more not a PE electrical, but he's more electrically trained, and he went for a mechanical position. And they're like, what do you know about mechanical? And he said, nothing. And still got hired. And I'm like, this is amazing to just see like people wanting individuals with different unique experiences coming in to give a different perspective. So even when you apply for a role, you may think it's one thing, but they may be needing something different, and creating that experience diversity on a team is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to make sure that you kind of tell that story. I've definitely also gotten into interviews where I've said, like, I don't know anything about this. And I did actually get those roles too. But I think it's hard when you isolate just that one phrase, because there's so much more to the person. And I think, showing that you're a self-starter, that you're interested, that you're motivated, that you're ready to learn, like all those skills are skills that you're building up, hopefully, regardless of the type of role, the type of company you're at. And those are really important skills that you can then leverage into any other role that you might be applying for. So I think it's really important to kind of think about the skills that you've developed that can actually translate really well into other industries.
Yeah. So when you were going through that pivot, were there particular things that you found you were really latching onto, and how did those connect to what you do as a CSM role?
Yeah, I think more than anything, what I really enjoyed of my the previous role working with the general contractor was I really enjoyed the implementation and enablement piece of it. So once the decision was made on the software, how can I kind of best get people up to speed on it, and working with those people that hopefully were interested and excited to kind of implement those software. So the CSM role lets me do that as a job. So it kind of perfectly aligned with exactly what I wanted to do, in that I'm able to work with customers and kind of teach them new features or work through their workflow with them, maybe make it better or optimize it or really work with them on whatever goals they're trying to achieve. Of course, no job is perfect. So this is just like the piece of it that I enjoy most, that I get to do a lot of in my current role.
Yeah. So are you more me just being dumb and not knowing what a CSM generally does? So are you doing sales, or are you like after a salesperson gets a new account, then you come in to help? All right, what does your company need? What process, onboarding, training? Like, where do you fit? If I even have that right, you can completely correct me wrong if I have the process.
No, that's not wrong. I'm struggling on how to answer this because every company does treat the CSM a little bit differently. So at Bluebeam, it is kind of a post-purchase. So as a CSM, we kind of work with like active accounts of certain sizes. So and then we work with their end users on training. If they're onboarding new team members, we kind of do assist with portions of that. So kind of depends. Different companies do different things, but we work alongside account managers who deal with like more of the traditional sales pieces of it. So that's why I said like I was too scared to do full sales role. That wasn't exactly what I wanted. So this is kind of like sales adjacent.
Yeah. And you get to help with all the processes and getting people up to speed that you liked before too. So.
Yeah, exactly. The role's also just given me a lot of flexibility to be really creative, which is something I didn't really realize how much I love just being really creative. Meaning we have goals that we're kind of expected to hit, but in terms of how we get to those goals is entirely up to us. So for example, like with the customers that I work with, I actually write a newsletter. I never thought that I would enjoy writing a newsletter because I've never really been one to write, but I've been kind of writing a lot more on LinkedIn and posting more of my thoughts on there. So the idea kind of came of like, what if I started doing this for the customers I work with? And so different like small initiatives like that have allowed me to kind of bridge together the technical side, but also the creative side, which is kind of a tricky balance to hit, I think, especially like with the background that I have.
Jumping back over from Stephanie, now we're going to jump into Paul Steidl, who is episode number 20. He started his own company, but is focused more on infill housing, which you could say is still more of the design role, but he's helping more of the management side and the documents needed to get through the legislation and policies to be able to build on your own land. And so he is out on the West Coast. And so he talks about what he's doing out in Sacramento to be able to help homeowners be able to leverage their land and use their land in other ways during the housing crisis. We also talk about taking breaks between your bachelor's and master's degree. So if you are currently studying and debating on taking a break or not, he talks about how he took a break, had experience in the real world working for a large firm, and then going back for his master's, and really how that master's shaped the company that he is running today called Build Casa. So take a look at his full episode if you want to learn more about those specific intricacies to his journey. But this clip, we're going to talk a little bit more about the infill housing side and how he decided to specialize over there. So hopefully you guys enjoy Paul Steidl's episode number 20.
The suburbs, but out here, oftentimes that means moving into like flood hazard zones or the wildland fire interface, where you're getting into some higher risk insurance rates and just higher risk areas to be building.
So Build Casa itself, you guys are more the proponent to help guide. I don't know if you want to go more into what you're doing within Build Casa, how that works.
Yeah. So, as an organization, like I said, we're identifying these opportunities, and then we've productized the full process of getting from A to Z. So what does it take to subdivide the property. Some homeowners are interested in doing that themselves and financing it. Others see the opportunity and the value that their land has, and what we do is provide them the opportunity to be paired with, a buyer of that land, and we finance the cost of subdivision to get it done.
So sometimes it's more selling the other part of the property, and sometimes it's more building for the owner's use.
Yeah, and then the other part is people want certainty around what can be built on the property. So that's where the design background is coming in, is coming up with typological home designs. We're really oriented around starter homes, missing middle-sized units. The opportunity that has is the introduction of smaller 2-bedroom, 2-bath units into single-family home neighborhoods that haven't seen new construction in a really, really long time. And these smaller units are affordable by design because they're smaller, but they're also more affordable in the sense that there's an increase of supply here. And so, we're really facing a housing shortage in the Bay Area and Sacramento and Southern California, as well as across the rest of the country. And what we should be doing is looking for all of the low-hanging fruit opportunities to build these infill housing units wherever we can.
Yeah. Now, are you just going after kind of the homes with the excess land, or have you started looking at any properties where the home is abandoned, that it's an opportunity to, hey, we can't salvage the home and we can build 2 units on it and help the neighborhood in that way? I don't know if you guys have gone that route yet.
Primarily what we've been looking for is existing homeowners who are interested in making use of the extra space on their lot. And so in all cases, they remain in place. It's actually a great way for someone who, is thinking about selling because they can't keep up with, property taxes or whatever, just rising costs of what it means to live in California, can have the opportunity to continue to live there and be supported by the land that they have rather than by selling the whole property and moving, somewhere else in the country.
Yeah, and then dealing with whatever interest rates are going on right now and trying to find a place.
Yeah. I mean, we're looking at other types of development as well, including on vacant land. And there's actually some ways now that didn't exist before where you can actually do the kind of ADU sale mechanism that I had been thinking about a long time ago, but primarily we're sticking to this urban lot split is usually the way that it's referred to.
Yeah. And then have you guys just done more work in California right now? I know you mentioned you could go outside.
Yeah, we started in Sacramento. The reason for that is there's a few reasons actually. One, Sacramento is really well suited for urban lot splits. It's flat generally. The lots were laid out in a really orderly rectangular fashion. There's a robust alleyway network, which means that if you split a property down the middle, oftentimes it has an alley in the back that can serve as a secondary frontage. Second reason is it's the state capital. And so we're using these new state regulations, and it's really important for us to show the way that these are working for positive change, and just to demonstrate that in the place where the lawmakers are actually doing their work. Third, it looks like the rest of the US more than some other Bay Area or Southern California cities might. So if we're trying to build a model that works really well in Austin, it makes sense to think about a city that can kind of, when you squint, it looks similar.
Yeah.
So we started in Sacramento. We're doing work in the Bay Area and also in a couple of Southern California cities as well. But the upzoning, tailwinds are definitely behind us. And we think that these types of regulations, just like ADU, streamlined subdivision processes, shot clocks on building permits, just all around ways to make building more infill housing easier is it's a movement that's going to continue to grow across the United States.
Yeah. That's why I asked kind of the infill question, because Pittsburgh is the opposite of flat and straight roads. So it's more opportunities that it would be vacant lots open because we don't have as many of the back alleys. Like I have a back alley on my house, which has been fantastic, but most neighborhoods don't. And then they're very skinny lots with like a cliff on the backside. So I'm curious. I like want to do a whole map over of Pittsburgh and see what it looks like, because I'm always curious with these things.
Topography provides like literally another dimension to the spatial analysis. So we're fortunate in the first city to be able to just look at things two-dimensionally and say, like, does this work? Because the assumption is that everything's flat. But as we expand to more places, we're having to expand that to include, slope analysis and understand, sure, this looks good when you look at it in a satellite image from space, but when you're actually on the ground, it's pretty difficult to be building on that. And so we have to build that into our analysis.
Yeah. Do they change any of like the setback requirements whenever you're doing an ADU, or do you still have to adhere to whatever's already been set?
Yeah. The way that these regulations are structured, the state regulation kind of supersedes local zoning in a lot of cases. So as an example, if you're building an ADU, you're not subject to the local requirements for side and rear setbacks. You are for front. That's similar to the way that the law that we're using, it's called SB 9, is oriented for building the additional primary units. So we're actually not kind of in the ADU building business. We're actually doing full-size single-family homes that could be, 12 or 1,400 square feet.
Yeah.
Or bigger.
And then backing up a little bit, how did you decide to leave HOK and start Build Casa? Because it's a big jump to start on your own.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the ideas were brewing, obviously, from some of the previous research that I had done. And after graduating, I actually kind of explored, like, what does it mean to take this research and turn it into a business? And I kind of gave myself a window of time to explore what that would mean. Ultimately, it's about, finding the right people to do it with, in my experience. And so, when I moved out here to California, I had reconnected with a good friend of mine from Pittsburgh, Ben Bear, and he's my co-founder now. But at the time, we were just kind of talking about ideas and research and things that have been done in the past. And those things percolated once these new regulations passed. He kind of, pushed me and challenged me on, like, would you be interested in trying to do this? And, starting a business with someone who's done it before, especially in the startup space, is really important. And I take a lot of, I look to Ben's experience to inform like a lot of the way that the business runs. Architects, I don't know for what reason, but like thinking about architecture as a product or thinking about marketing as sales is like a dirty word. And I think that can be really challenging when you move from like the architecture world into, tech generally, or like into starting a business of your own of any type. And so being challenged to think about, what are the ways to take the architectural background that you have and productize that. And that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing because it's going to like create more home ownership opportunities and, meeting all of the right people along the way to invest in the company and also to like advise us along the way on the best ways to do that has been a collaborative effort.
So what's Ben's background in?
So Ben previously was the CEO of Spin, which is the scooter company. I think they had an operation in Pittsburgh as well.
Yeah, they
Um,
allowed, because I know the state of Pennsylvania does not allow scooters, and they let Pittsburgh be a beta test. And so I think it was Spin. I feel like we had another company, but then it was out of its beta version. And so,
yeah,
and the government hasn't changed, so all the scooters are gone. You still see some that are sporadically left behind that weren't picked up, but they were
yeah,
fantastic.
yeah. And so his background, obviously, like being in this micro mobility space, you have a lot of interface with governments. And, my understanding of Spin is that they positioned themselves with local governments as being a cooperative partner,
Mm-hmm.
especially relative to some of the other scooter companies, which I don't know if you've heard stories, but I think a lot of them were kind of in the camp of, you know, uh, beg for forgiveness rather than ask for permission in terms of like launching. And so um, he's basically been involved in these startups that have, strong missions and are also just regulatory slogs in some ways. Like what we're doing is not easy. And I think he's interested in taking on these big challenges that have a real world impact, and has really led the company well.
Yeah, is he still with Spin and doing this too?
Nope,
Or is he
we're
full
both
on?
full time. Mm-hmm.
Hope you guys enjoyed learning from Paul. And now I want to introduce to you Melanie Fontenot. She was episode number 14, and she is a specifications consultant. So she is an architect, worked in an architecture firm, and she talks about her journey on slowly getting introduced to specs within the firm, gathering and gaining knowledge to becoming the lead spec writer for that firm, and then deciding how to pivot and go more on the consulting side. She's even worked for Deltec and now works for Conspectus. So what it's like to not be in that traditional firm practice as a spec writer, but being a consultant for multiple firms to be able to help out on their projects. And if you're looking for help on specifications, know that there are specification consultants that can help you along their way. So in her clip, we talk about what it was like to transition more into being a spec writer focused part of the industry, what she's doing over there, everything within CSI, the Construction Specifications Institute, and so much that she does to help out her local chapters. So hopefully you guys enjoy learning from Melody. And again, her episode is number 14. Now moving on to you switching to being a full-time spec writer and stepping away from that architect role, what made that decision for you, or what were the stepping stones that you're like, I really like specs and I want to do that full-time?
I feel like was resistant to it. And when I was making a move from Oklahoma to Oregon, that was when I found out through a CSI friend that there was a position open at Master Spec. And, I basically just went for it and ended up, I think, getting my foot in the door partially because of my CSI certifications
Mm-hmm.
and having a friend there through CSI. So it was actually something I hadn't really thought about. I had been thinking about as I moved, like, would I want to be an independent consultant and just do specs on my own, be my own boss? And then I thought, gosh, that seems like I'm not the type of person that really wants to necessarily run my own business and do the invoicing side of it and all those other kind of admin things that come along with the business ownership side. And then of course, moving from Oklahoma to Oregon, I was also like, it seems a little bit of a big step to try to go out on my own when I'm also changing regions, going to somewhere where I really don't know anyone except for a couple of CSI friends that I've met at conferences before I moved here. But so that just didn't seem like the wisest of moves. And when the Master Spec opportunity opened up, I jumped on board and got it was very interesting to learn just about even styles of a Word document and how those control, that page format kind of stuff we talked about, and some of the things that I hadn't had as much time to dig into while I'm working on projects. And I really actually got to do some very focused research as I was updating sections there, and you'd really get to kind of dive into, a certain topic. So that was really, really cool. I really enjoyed being able to do the kind of the deep dive and really try to learn. Like I did some updates to the unit masonry section, and I got to, learn a whole lot about all the different organizations that are kind of around masonry and brick and things like that. And I cut that master section down from 72 pages to 66 pages. And I felt like that was a very big feat.
That's very big.
Streamline some things. But it was just interesting, even in that process. Like I talked to one manufacturer who said, you really don't need like the rubberized asphalt copper in there anymore, that flashing type. Nobody's really making it anymore. So just kind of being able to have some of that, it felt like more behind the scenes information about some products. And I was also in charge of some of the waterproofing sections. So I did some deep dives there, and I was amazed at how I felt like I needed to call my friend from high school who's a chemistry teacher and ask her for a crash course, because it was, polyethyl, just, STPE, all the different chemistries and chemicals that go into the waterproofing and roofing membranes. And it was a lot. It's very interesting to dig into some of that, and and then find even more of those little nuances, like even just the difference in things being called fiberglass or glass fiber. There's a difference. Just some of that stuff was very interesting. Some of those little tiny nuances, and being exposed to that whole process of how those documents are updated, and how the software works and all that. And then Conspectus, I did really want to keep doing specs, and Conspectus has a reputation that was just, they seemed like the gold standard of spec companies, and they just seemed like it was all these people who I'd heard of through CSI that are working together. And then I was like, oh, and they have their own software. That's just super cool. And I will say, I feel like I am now, like, I've had my first ever like proactive boss. I know it's really hard in business. You of course, bosses have to be proactive and have forethought and to stay in business. But I always felt like, especially at architecture firms, there's more reacting going on in management than thinking ahead. And it is hard to balance those two things and, keep everybody on track, but then moving forward somewhere where to be going, and not just kind of standing still and doing things the way you've always done them. I do think architecture in general, this industry gets really hung up on that. Contractors too, right? Like, they'll just add more costs to a bid if it's something they're not as familiar with, sort of that unknown factor. And even that was something I kind of learned at the master spec portion of my career was, how hard it is for like a new and innovative material to get to market. If you want a UL test, that's tens of thousands of dollars, right? Like, so to get listed and do all those tests that need to be done, it's a long, arduous track. So it's really amazing how many pieces of the puzzle there are. And honestly, some days I'm amazed that buildings get built at all, right? I'm like,
and new products come in because of that barrier. And then it's a long lead time for them because, they're trying to at least get on the spec. But then even the specs and the design may take years, depending on the size of the project. And then by the time they're actually built, if they're more of a last finished material, they're not going in until the very end. So definitely. Wrapping up our little clips of alternate career paths, which these aren't all the alternate career paths that were discussed in season 1. So feel free to flip through all of season 1 to check out other career stories along the way. But the last one I want to highlight is Tara Lebowski. She was episode number 42. And I met her at AIA National this year and went through one of her presentations on bringing construction management tools into the design phase. And she's actually pivoted out of architecture and more on the construction management side, being an owner's rep, and actually started her own company being an owner's rep. So I know I interviewed other professionals that have gone down the developer side or owner's rep for a company, but Tara's actually taken it and created her own business with it. But we talk about construction management strategies and how more planning and guidance can be done during the design side, even though design is fluid and flexible and things adapt and change. And it's not as straightforward as the construction side where you know what you need to do and you need to complete the work. But if you can bring in some of those principles into the design phase, how you can run a project design a lot more smoothly and in a direction that makes sense to make sure you're making decisions at certain points to be able to move a project forward. So with Tara, I wanted to give you guys a glimpse on what it's like on the construction management side and what she's doing with her business. So hopefully you guys like enjoying learning from Tara. And she was episode number 42.
But how's it been transitioning from employee to business owner?
Like I said, it's been a little bit of a struggle. I've owned during the recession, I had the opportunity just to start a side gig because I had a neighbor who was, when I was living in Baltimore City, he flipped row houses and just had me do some drawings for him. So my brother said, make sure you get insurance and, create a separate company to protect yourself. So I had a little bit of an idea of, insurance and how to bill people and create, that was my first opportunity to create my first fee schedule and really think about that. So I'm glad I did it. I stopped doing that when I went back to school, but it was a good experience just to understand that. And I have another side gig now where I go to markets and festivals and sell my art. So that was a good experience too, because I had to understand about, marketing. And, I still struggle with understanding social media and making sure the word gets out. And I can spend half a day sometimes writing social media posts. And so that's kind of the biggest thing is really, I don't have any employees, but it's more just really understanding marketing and, getting your message out to people. And I'm still learning, but one of the good things is, so I live on the Mason-Dixon line, so I operate in Maryland and Pennsylvania. So I kind of have to do double duty with marketing, but I met a lot of great people. I got involved with the Mid-Atlantic Lean Community of Practice. I've been attending some of those events, which have been good. Around the Harrisburg area, there's the Keystone Contractors Association has a series called Improving Project Outcomes that I've gone to. And I really enjoy those because they try to bring, owners, contractors, and designers all together to talk about, improvement. So that's just something that now is, I don't know if I want to say my passion, but something that I've really been developing much more interest in. And I've also been going through, getting my third-party certification as a WBE. I just got my Pennsylvania Diverse Business Enterprise certification and, filling out a lot of forms and, what's the balance sheet I have to submit, for the 5th time for all these applications. So, and, always looking for opportunities, researching architecture firms and engineering firms, seeing what kind of work they do and trying to connect. So it's, we talked about at the beginning, it is, you have real highs and real lows, but at the same time, it's, all me. So it's pretty exciting. And, thinking about trying to keep an open mind that maybe I might shift a little bit in, what my goals are, but, just looking for every opportunity.
Yeah. And I think keeping an open mind just because you never know if an opportunity will lead you somewhere. I guess like when you found the job that you were doing more CA work and you hadn't done as much. And then that kind of fostered you shifting into construction management. So you never know.
I hope you enjoyed learning from all these professionals on alternate career paths and looking forward to learning from even more professionals in season 2, seeing different avenues and paths you can take your career, no matter if it's slight adjacencies, pivots, still in the industry, or full kilter, taking on a different role entirely. But if you want to go back and take a look at any of these episodes that you listened to this episode, it was Stephen Albert was episode number 14. Again, he was the owner side for a healthcare provider. Jennifer Keegan, episode number 25, and she is the director of building and roofing science at GAF. You can always contact her team if you're learning and looking to improve your building science side of your skill set. Stephanie Reichman, episode number 35. She is a civil engineer that pivoted over into the tech side, working for Bluebeam. Paul Steidl, episode number 20, focusing on infill housing and taking a little bit different of a business approach to the AEC industry. Melanie Fontenot, episode number 14. She is a specifications consultant and always looking to talk about specs, and she can help you with your specifications and even learning through CSI certifications. And wrapped up with Tara Lebowski, episode number 42, on the construction management side and being an owner's rep. So take a look at Tara, and I've had a couple other owner's reps along the way as well. So hope you guys enjoyed this little wrap up on the topic of alternate career paths, and looking forward to what I can bring to you in season 2. And again, season 2 kicks off February 13th. I hope you enjoyed our discussion today. Learn some advice to take with you and see how our industry is all tied together to create the world around us. Check out the description below for any links or resources we discussed. If you liked the episode, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. Give me a thumbs up and leave a comment below. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support finding that career path that best works for them. If you know someone that has inspired your own career that you'd like me to interview, let me know in the comments below, or you can reach out to me via my website or LinkedIn. I'd be happy to share their story or your own. Thank you again, and I cannot wait for the next career story I get to share with you next week.